What's up, guys? It's Tigo from the Foot and Fist Sports Network, back once again with some more Premier League content. It is the Premier League Aftermath show of Week 6. And for the first time this season, I don't think that there was any, really controversial results or anything, really surprising. So it's odd. It's odd. It's a less intense week to talk about. But for sure, there was still plenty to go into. The first game we're going to break down is West Ham versus Tottenham, a London derby. And it was a game that West Ham didn't necessarily desperately need to win, but they definitely needed to at least make it a game where they played and had a decent performance, to be fair. They didn't do that, man. They did not do that. They went out, played against Tottenham. They were down 3-0. The only reason they got 2 goals back is because Aurier got himself sent off. From then on, they started to do a little bit better because they had a bit more space, and they were playing against a team that was in 10 men, who was also away from home. And granted, Tottenham tend to play better away from home than they do at home this season. But still, it's still a team with 10 men. And at the end of the day, West Ham, yes, they did a good job of getting themselves back into that game and at least making an effort to possibly get 1 point out of it. But still, if you look at what happened before the send-off, before the red card, they were nowhere near in that game. They were just getting dominated from start to finish. They didn't really put in the effort. It didn't really look like they were going to be even making an attempt of closing down Tottenham when they had the ball, which is something you have to do when you're taking on players of that caliber. Especially when they're so good at passing, you can't really rely on them making mistakes. You have to force them to make mistakes, and West Ham simply wasn't even trying to do that. It seemed like. So it was a very bad result for them, very bad performance. It wasn't necessarily as bad on paper, but definitely losing a London derby where you have to be motivated for at least a derby. If your players aren't even capable of really getting themselves and putting in as much effort as possible in a derby, you have to realize there's a bit of a problem in that locker room. There has to be something addressed in there to get these players really going as hard as they can, because listen, if they continue like this, they're going to be in a relegation scrap, and realistically with the players they have, they shouldn't even be close to that. There's Ulo once again. They shouldn't be that close to the relegation zone. They have some really good players. It's just a matter of the players don't seem to want to go out there and really put in all the effort. It's the same thing at the beginning of last season. When the season started, they were doing awful. They had an awful start of the season. But once things were close to where they were really looking like they could possibly go down to the championship, they really started to turn on. And it seems like that is a mentality problem for those players. I don't know how much of it is also Slaven Bilic not being a good manager. We don't really know how, because he hasn't had a good couple of seasons. But still, once the players turned it on last season, they did really well. So is it Bilic, or is it his players simply not trying to give as much effort as possible to the manager and to the club? They need to figure that out very, very soon. Because if it is Bilic, they get the fuck out of here. Get rid of him. If not, if it's the players, you have to find a way to get them to give as much effort as possible. Because right now, they are not looking good at all, and they don't seem to be improving in the least. Southampton versus Manchester United was a game I expected to be pretty similar to how it actually turned out to be. I didn't expect United to go out there and really just run them over, because we've seen United struggle a few times this season to score goals. Even against Everton recently, it wasn't like we just went out there and were free-flowingly scoring. We had that 1-0, and then until Lukaku, I can't remember who got the second goal. Anyway, until we scored that second goal, we weren't really looking like the floodgates were going to open. It took a while for us to break down and get that second goal. So that does seem to be a common theme this season, is we score the first one relatively early, and then we have a bit of a hard time trying to get that second one, which is normal because the other teams sort of close themselves off and don't want to concede that second one because they want to keep themselves in it. And possibly at the end of the game, when there is a lot of just tension in there, and when they feel like they haven't really lost, when there's really nothing for them to lose other than maybe 3 points, they go out there and then they try to get a goal, and they sometimes possibly get a goal. That's not exactly what happened, of course, in this game. Southampton were pretty competitive throughout the match. And early on in the first half, they were definitely playing better, and yes, we did get a goal very early on, which was completely against the run of play. But Southampton were looking like the superior team. For some reason, they were just being able to control possession for the first 15 minutes, and then from then on, United really started to turn it on. Not creating too many great chances, but at least we were creating some. And Southampton didn't really create a whole lot in the first half too. So we definitely deserve to be in the lead in that first half, because United are just so much better team than Southampton. So as long as you contain them when they do get around your final third, then you're fine. That's pretty much what happened the whole time. Southampton were getting close. They had some good possession. They were playing some really good football, but they just weren't really able to break us down. They had a few chances. I think De Gea made, what was it, late in the game, he made a great save. Like, it wasn't really a save, actually. It was like a cross coming in. He literally full stretch with his arm up forward. He managed to catch the ball, because if not, it was dropping straight to a Southampton striker, and they probably would have made it 1-1. So, there were a few chances there where Southampton were looking dangerous, but nothing too much. And overall, United did a good job to control the game, ended up getting a 1-0 win at a place that's never really easy to go to, because St. Mary's Southampton have an amazing support at home. So it was never going to be an easy game, but we managed to get 3 points, and that is all that matters. Stoke versus Chelsea is a game I definitely expected to be a lot closer. In my predictions, I expected a 2-2 draw. Why? Well, because Stoke have done really, really well against a lot of the big teams so far this season. Arsenal, they beat at home. They drew 2-2 with United. So I expected it to be a tougher game than it actually was for Chelsea. And you have to give credit where credit is due. Chelsea have really turned things around this season. They started off with that rough result at home against Burnley. That was a really, really bad start. They also looked kind of bad in the second game, but they were starting to continue to bring up points, and they really have been looking really, really good. Morata has been looking like a tremendous signing. He's going to look like he's going to be a phenomenal player for them for sure. And overall, their team has it's remained a great team. Overall, in the long haul, I think they're still going to be unraveled by how many games they have to play with such a shallow team. But still, in the league, as long as they aren't playing a ton of games in a row, they're still going to be very solid. We're going to see what's going to happen in October when things start to get a bit more hectic. But still, as of right now, they're doing really, really well. And Stoke City, I expect them to do a whole lot better because of the fact that they have really good players in the counterattack like Jesse Rodriguez or like Xherdan Shaqiri. I expect them to be a little bit more dangerous than they were. But unfortunately for them, Chelsea were just too good for them on the day. And defensively, Chelsea are pretty good. Even without David Luiz, who in my opinion isn't a very good center back, they still were able to hold them off and not really allow them to do a whole lot. So good result for Chelsea, without a doubt. They definitely are keeping themselves closer to the lead than I expected them to after that first game of the season. I don't know how long it's going to last, but I definitely think they're going to do well. And Stoke City still are going to be one of those teams that are very, very hard to beat, especially at home. There's always going to be that threat of going to the Britannia Stadium on a cold winter night and having to do the business against a physical Stoke team. Everton versus Bournemouth, like I said in my prediction video, was going to be a pretty close game, but definitely a game that Everton had all the chances to win because of the fact that, they have a much better team than Bournemouth, and Bournemouth haven't been playing much better than Everton have recently. Everton had lost like 3 games in a row, maybe 4. Or was it Everton? It was Spurs, Atalanta, United, and now they lost. They beat Bournemouth. And before Bournemouth won last week, they were on a 4-game losing streak, then they lost once again to Everton. So they've been having a really, really hard time starting off this season. And obviously there's still plenty of time to go to make the ground up, especially with a good manager like Eddie Howe and the players that they did bring in. There's plenty of time for them to find a good system that works for the players that they brought in and the players they already had. It's just a matter of really finding out what's going to work. Because right now, Bournemouth are looking really, really bad. But let's not forget that these guys were like really, I can't remember if they were 9th or more or less around the top 10 last season. I'm pretty sure they were like 9th. So there's still a team with a lot of quality, and I don't really think they lost any really good players, anything in particular that they lost. So they definitely are a team that has to be considered one of the favorites to get themselves out of the relegation zone very early. It's just a matter of them getting a bit of an easier schedule and then really starting to bring in some points. I mean, obviously, Bournemouth are going to be a tough team all season long to go, especially at the Vitality Stadium. They're always a pretty decent team. But unfortunately for them, Everton are generally a good team. They have had a bit of a hard time lately, but before that they were doing really well. They had a 1-1 draw against City. They won the first game against, I think it was Stoke, to be honest. Stoke City. That's just always a tough team to play. So they have had some few good wins. It's just a matter of them finding that rhythm again, getting themselves back in some momentum, finding the right style, because Rooney and Sigurdsson haven't really been mixing very well. Sandro has not been playing very well as a striker, so they really need to figure out what system's going to work for him. Just much like Bournemouth, to be honest with you. It's just that Everton have a much better team. I thought the Courier was here with some nice little boxes, but apparently wasn't. So anyway, Everton in general have a much better team. Unfortunately for them, they just haven't really been able to find the right system and find the right calibrations between the players to really send them to where they should be, which is, in my opinion, around the top 8. The only 0-0 draw of the weekend was Burnley versus Huddersfield, and this was honestly a game that I expected Burnley to win because of the fact that at home, they have a tremendous record. And Huddersfield have sort of been figured out by most of the teams in the league at this point. It always happens when these teams get newly promoted. The teams don't really know exactly how they play. They don't know how to defend them, and they don't know how to counterattack them. And Huddersfield were doing a very good job at implementing their just high-octane game to really mess with some of the teams that they were playing against. Unfortunately for them, now the teams have really figured them out. And Burnley, they're a team that doesn't necessarily win a lot of games, but at home, they're generally very solid, so I was always expecting them to at least get a draw. I personally expected them to win, but a draw is probably still fine for them. These are two teams that are battling for the relegation zone, so definitely these two teams would have wanted to beat the other. It would have been massive for their season. Unfortunately for them, there was just a bit of a stalemate. Not a whole lot to talk about in this game, no goals, so not a whole lot to really discuss. And either way, it's a game that doesn't really do anything in favor of either team, because they both needed the points to get away from the other one in the relegation zone, and the teams behind them could have used it to get themselves a little bit closer. And some of these teams that we will discuss later on, like Brighton and Swansea, Brighton and Watford, definitely did take advantage of that situation. Roy Hodgson is here, and as I said in the prediction video, he was going to get absolutely destroyed. I mean, there was no doubt about it. Like, how the fuck is Crystal Palace going to come back with Roy Hodgson, of all managers, and do a good job against Manchester City? It was just never going to happen. City, from the very opening game of the game, just ran them over. It wasn't even close. 5-0. Just a ton of goals. Aguero, as always, getting fucking goals. He is a tremendous striker. That whole team right now is really looking really, really, really dangerous. We haven't really had any tough matchups recently, so we'll see what happens once they start to play some of the bigger teams a bit closer to each other. But still, City are looking like title contenders without a doubt. If United don't manage to keep pace as long as them, it's going to be a tough one, because I think it's going to be a matter of who can get some distance early on and who can be consistent, throughout the season, because there's always going to be some patches in a season where you're going to be struggling. It's just a matter of who can keep the patches to be as short as possible. And right now, neck and neck, man. Yes, they have a better goal difference than us, but they've also been playing lesser competition. Like Crystal Palace. I'm pretty sure United would have beat Crystal Palace 4-0 at least, too. So there's always that to take into consideration, but there's no denying that City are a tremendous team. And one thing I'm really looking forward to seeing of them, and obviously I want them to fail, but what are they going to do in the Champions League? Because this season, their attacking is even better than before. Obviously, they fixed some of the defensive problems. I'm still not convinced by Otamendi or Mangala in defense or John Stones. I don't think that they have a good center back pairing in the least bit, regardless of who they put in. So that is still a big weakness for them. But they obviously fixed it with the fullbacks. They have improved their defense. What are they going to do in the Champions League? Because that's really where they need to make an impression. Because if you see, over the past few years, in the Premier League, yes, they've always been contenders, but in the Champions League, they've underwhelmed big time. This is the season that Guardiola needs to really show what City can do in Europe. Because if not, they're going to continue to have that loser's mentality in Europe and continue to not be relevant in the Champions League, basically. So they need to do something this season and do it now. They need to start improving there and really make a name for themselves. Because if not, they're always going to be just the second Manchester club that nobody really gives a shit about. That's just reality. As for poor Crystal Palace, I do think they're probably going to get some results coming in soon because of the fact that, yes, Roy Hodgson is there, but every time there's a new manager, the team starts to play better because they want to impress that new manager. When De Boer came in, I don't think anybody actually had any realistic expectations that the guy was going to succeed because his last job was an absolute failure with Inter. And obviously Roy Hodgson just failed with England, so nobody's expecting him to really do some amazing job. But still, they're going to probably try to do something impressive for him and try to get themselves a place in the Premier League, maybe with another team, if Crystal Palace do indeed get relegated. But still, you have to understand, this is Roy Hodgson. We're not talking about Rafa Benitez with Newcastle going to somehow reinvent the team and reinvent the club. We're talking about a guy who's borderline decent as a manager and probably isn't going to do a whole lot. So I do think they're going to get a few decent results in the near future, but in the long run, I do not expect good things for Crystal Palace. Swansea versus Watford was very much a game between two teams that are more or less rivals in terms of what type of position they're going to be finishing in. Swansea were early contenders to be relegated, and Watford were more or less in that range too. The difference is Watford brought in some good players, and they brought in some definitely players that are game changers for them. Not necessarily elite level players, but definitely some guys that can at least keep them out of the relegation zone. And they have been doing that. They've been doing a very, very good job. They've had some really, really good results. And overall, they are looking like a good team. Obviously, that last week against Manchester City where they got smashed 6-0. That wasn't a good look. But other than that, they haven't really had any really bad results, especially that 3-3 draw with Liverpool that I always mention. That was a hell of a performance from them. And overall, they've continued to look pretty solid, and I do expect them to finish out of the relegation zone. Swansea were definitely a team that they needed to beat because, like I said, they're contenders against each other for salvation. And they definitely went out there away from home. It's always a good thing to do to beat one of your main rivals, whatever you're fighting for. And Swansea, at home, they desperately needed to beat a team like Watford because that would have given them a bit more of a hope to have a team closer to being behind them when it actually counts in the season. And let me tell you, man, Swansea, they just don't seem to have anything in the tank. And for some reason, Swansea fans believe this is their best team they've ever had. And I don't get it. How can you sell your best player and somehow have improved your team? It's just not possible. It's really not possible. Unless, you sell, if you're Real Madrid, you sell Cristiano Ronaldo, you bring in Messi and Neymar. Okay, fine, then yeah, you did improve your team, but there's just no way that you're going to improve your team when you sell your best player. It's just really, really hard to do. And Swansea most certainly didn't do that. Who'd they bring in? They brought in Renato Sanchez, a player who's 18 years old, who just isn't really going to be a game changer for you. So it's just really hard to see how they actually think that this is their best team of all time. I'm really confused by it, but I guess they have their reasons. Anyway, bottom line is Swansea need to really start turning things up. If not, they are going to be definitely in a scrap for that relegation battle among some teams that actually have a bit more consistency than them, which is really hard to say because Brighton have won 2 games this season, and yet they are still probably a better team than Swansea, at least in terms of consistency and in terms of what their players could do compared to what they are actually doing. Speaking of teams that are probably going to lose their best players, Liverpool beat Leicester 3-2, and all the Liverpool fans that were talking shit about Coutinho, you probably should eat your words, because without that guy, you guys are borderline Europa League contenders. You are not even close to being in the battle for the top 4. With him, you have a chance. Without him, you do not. So I would probably not talk shit about the guy. He stayed at the end of the day, whether he wanted to stay or whether he was sort of forced into staying, it doesn't matter. Back your motherfucking player and let this guy express himself. Don't be dicks to him when realistically he is the only reason you have been relevant in the last few years. If he would have left, you would have had the money to bring in some much better players. So I wouldn't have been too mad if I was a Liverpool fan regardless. It happened when we lost Cristiano Ronaldo. Obviously, Cristiano Ronaldo was a million times more highly rated than Coutinho was, but still, you lose Cristiano Ronaldo, and if you invest that money, then you intend to at least stay at the top. Unfortunately for Alex Ferguson, we didn't invest the money, so we weren't really able to stay really relevant in the Champions League. Unfortunately, we did make it to the finals even without him 2 years after that, but still, you need to invest that money. And if Liverpool would have been able to invest the Coutinho money, they would have definitely had a much better team than they have right now, because let's not forget, Coutinho, as good as he is, number one, he's a bit fragile, so he gets injured quite often. And number two, he's a bit hit and miss because he's really, really good. When he's on his day, he's tremendous. But there are times where it's better to have him against you than it is to have him with you because he makes a lot of mistakes. He does some stupid things. So yes, he's a great player, but is he an elite player? I don't personally think so. I don't see him as that great. He is tremendous, but he's just not as consistent. If you look at great players, you think of Cristiano Ronaldo, Messi, Suarez, Bale, Neymar, guys that week in, week out are giving you performances that are absolutely divine, basically. So I don't think he's at that level yet. He could potentially get there, but right now, especially with Liverpool, who are such an inconsistent team, I don't see him being that. Anyway, Liverpool, coming into this game, they knew 2 things. We're going to score a lot of goals because Leicester defense is trash, and we're going to concede a lot of goals because Leicester's offense is pretty damn solid. And Leicester had the exact same knowledge about playing Liverpool. And at the end of the day, just like I said happened, it's about whichever team concedes less goals. They went out there, they both scored a bunch of goals, 4 goals between them, and then Liverpool managed to get that 3rd goal. At the end of the day, man, Leicester's defense is just not good enough. Their offense is good. Defensively, they are not good enough. Wes Morgan showed last season he is not capable of leading a Premier League defense. I don't know how the fuck he did it 2 years ago, but somehow he did it. But now he's clearly not capable of doing it. Also, that Maguire guy, he's not that great. He's okay, but he's not that great. Liverpool have a very similar problem. The only difference is Liverpool's offense is better than Leicester's offense. So that really saves them in a lot of situations because Salah, Firmino, Mane, Coutinho, Emre Can when he moves forward. These are all players that are really, really dangerous. Also, Wijnaldum is really good at moving forward too. These are all players that are really, really dangerous. And Leicester don't have that luxury because they only have Vardy, Mahrez, and Iheanacho, essentially. I guess Slimani sort of in the box is good, but there's not really a whole lot of danger when you're playing Okazaki. When you're playing Okazaki. If you're playing Leicester City, you only have to really worry about Mahrez and Vardy. That really, really hurts you. Everybody else is just kind of meh. Whereas with Liverpool, you have those four guys that are really, really dangerous, have a lot of pace, and can really get in behind the defense if you make even a slight millimetrical mistake and allow them to stay onside. If you beat them offside, then they're going to have tons of problems. But if you do make some mistakes with your timing, they're going to cause you a lot of problems. And that's what Liverpool did to Leicester. And at the end of the day, man, these are two teams that are pretty evenly matched. And I think that really shows where they're going to be in the league. I don't think Liverpool are going to make it to the top four just because their defense is just too shambolic. And they don't really have the consistency to eke out results and keep clean sheets, because that's a big thing to do in this league. And you can score as many goals as you want, but when your defense is that leaky, you're eventually going to drop points, and Liverpool consistently do drop points. Of all the teams we can expect to be involved in a relegation scrap at the end of the season, Brighton are without a doubt the team that came out of this weekend with the most confidence, with the best momentum, with the best result. They beat Newcastle, who is without a doubt one of their main rivals for relegation, 1-0 at home. That's a solid result because Newcastle were on a 3-game winning streak. They were looking really, really good, and they were looking like they were going to go to Brighton and smash them. Luckily for Brighton, they blew it. I mean, let's just be honest with you, man. Newcastle had everything to lose in this game. They're definitely the better team. They have the better manager, so they had to go out there and impose their will and impose their game plan and win the game. They just weren't able to even do that. They weren't even able to get a goal, which is just very, very sad. And it has been a problem for Newcastle this season. If you look at their performances, their results is always like 1-0, 1-1, maybe 2-1 if they're lucky. They don't really score a lot of goals, and they do tend to concede at least one a game. I think the only time that they scored 3 was against West Ham. So they haven't really had a lot of offensive success this season, and they need to really work on that because that's a big problem for them. If they aren't even able to score and they still can manage to concede a goal a game, then they're definitely not going to be able to get any solid results like consistently. Obviously, 3 wins on the bounce is definitely good. So to lose against Brighton, it is bad, but it's a little bit less of a hit than it would have been if they hadn't had that 3-game winning streak. But still, losing to a team that's definitely your rivals for relegation is always very bad, especially, man, when these two teams played each other a bunch of times last season in the the Championship. They played twice in the Championship. I don't know. I think they may have met in the Cup as well. But still, they should have had the knowledge of what Brighton's going to do because they didn't really improve the team at all. It's pretty much the same players, and they still weren't able to do that. It is a shame. It's definitely a shame that happened. They weren't able to really do a whole lot. At the end of the day, though, I think that Newcastle will still improve, and Brighton are definitely, of the two teams, the ones I expect to be more likely to get relegated. But still, Brighton, solid result, solid performance against a very, very important team to beat for them, and I hope for them that they do continue to improve. Final game of the weekend is Arsenal versus West Brom, and let me tell you, this is a game that didn't necessarily go much different than I expected, because I expected West Brom to get a 1-1 draw, to be honest with you, because of the fact that West Brom do tend to make games hard, but I wasn't aware of the stat before I did the video, and it is unfortunate. West Brom have gotten like 2 away wins in like the last 60 games, something like that. So that's not exactly very good, and I wish I would have known that because that's not very favorable because that their drawing record also isn't very good. So they tend to not do well away from home, and if I'd have known that, I definitely would have picked Arsenal to win. And the reason I really picked them, like I said in the predictions if you haven't seen it, is the fact that West Brom play very physically, and Arsenal tend to have a hard time against physical teams, and I expected that to be a common theme in this match. Unfortunately, Arsenal had just too much quality for West Brom, and West Brom didn't really switch on all game. And yes, there was the whole fact that Alexis Sanchez took a dive, he got the first free kick that it actually didn't score off of, but still, that is taking a dive, and Tony Pulis has been complaining about that, has really been making a lot of noise about how he thinks he should have gotten a red card or a yellow card or something like that, he should have been banned or something like that. But still, at the end of the day, Arsenal managed to get the win, and they managed to beat West Brom. So, Tony Pulis, you can complain as much as you want, but they aren't going to change the result afterwards. And it's not like there was some crazy thing. And yes, apparently, I didn't see the game, admittedly, so I didn't see the dive, I didn't see the penalty claim that apparently Tony Pulis is adamant that actually was definitely a guaranteed penalty. They should have gotten a penalty. So, I don't know how much they got screwed over in this game, but still, man, Arsenal got the win. They are improving defensively because this is the second game in a row that they've kept a clean sheet, which is definitely a massive improvement for them considering how bad their defense was at the start of the season. If they can continue to do that, then there's a chance of them getting themselves back into the top 3, maybe even the top 4, maybe borderline there. But I definitely think that if they can continue to do that, they will probably finish in the Champions League. It just depends on what happens with Tottenham. I think Tottenham are still the better team, but Tottenham with that Wembley curse are still looking like a team that could possibly finish outside the top 4. Because it's one thing to have some bad results away from home, but when you're also struggling at home, that's a big problem. And I think that Tottenham are still going to finish top 4, but they need to figure out what the fuck is up with that Wembley curse. As for West Brom, I expect them to do a little bit better as the season go on. I always expect them to be like a top, I would say 13 to 10th team, because they're a team that at home is always very tough to beat. Away from home, obviously they struggle, but still, Tony Pulis is a very solid manager, and he is able to squeak out results when even when he really shouldn't. So he's always good at that, and you can always expect West Brom to at least stay in the Premier League, and if not, just at least in the Premier League, then definitely finish around the 15th spot, and I guess you could say what you would expect them to do with the players they have. They probably could do a little bit better, but the manager they have is very conservative and doesn't really go out there take the risk, because if you want great rewards, you gotta take some risks. And Tony Pulis has never been that type of manager in his career, and that's why, as long as he's there, West Brom fans are gonna have to endure 2 things: boring football and very mediocre results. Alright guys, that is it for the video. If you enjoyed it, please soccer kick the shit out of that like button, pride style. And also let me know in the comment section down below who impressed you the most, and who do you think is going to be relegated among the teams that went head-to-head against each other this weekend. Also guys, thank you so much for the people that have been tuning in. I've been getting a lot more views lately in my Premier League content, and hopefully some of you guys will share it to help me improve and get more traction on here as well, because there was a time where I think my Bastian Schweinsteiger video had like 10,000 views. There was a time where I was getting a lot of views, and for some reason it just tapered off like very randomly. I don't know what happened there with my YouTube algorithm changed for sure, but I don't know what's going on, and I would definitely love to get back to that point, and I definitely need you guys to help me out if you want to do that. I'm going to be starting a Patreon. My dad and I just bought a website, so we will be putting in some written articles, so if you want to see the written version of this, I am probably a better writer than I am a video maker, so that might be something to take into consideration. Definitely check that out. Once it's all out there, I will have it up. Probably going to be a while, but still, it's in development. So thank you so much, guys, for watching and tuning in. I've been Dago from the Foot and Fist Sports Network, and I will see you in the next video.